What does it take to actually get a bestseller on Etsy? Bestsellers are those listings you see with tons of sales and reviews. And if you're a newer shop or even just a smaller shop, it kind of feels like something far to achieve. Like that's something reserved for people who have been on the platform for years. But the thing is, it's not as out of reach as it looks. Even newer shops can land on bestsellers, and it's not by luck. Well, most of the time, but by doing a few fundamental things consistently. For me personally, I've had a few bestsellers over the 2 years that I've been on Etsy. I think maybe at least 7, and I'm not really even completely sure because Etsy doesn't really tell you when it happens, which is something I wish they would fix. It would be nice to get a little notification saying, "Congratulations, this listing is now a bestseller." But for now, it kind of just happens quietly in the background. And then I get surprised whenever I'm checking on one of my listings that has been selling well for a while, and apparently it's got a bestseller badge. When I look back at those listings, none of them were actually random inclusions in my shop. There was always some level of research behind them. But it wasn't just about doing research in the generic sense. Everyone says do your research, but no one really explains how to do that in a way that actually leads to something worth making. So in this video, I want to walk you through the 3 ways I personally find product ideas that actually have a shot of becoming bestsellers. And it's not by copying what's already working, but finding ways to add value to what already exists. The first method is using a research tool. And I know this isn't anything new if you've been around Etsy content for a while. People love debating which tool is the best, which one has better data, which one is more worth your money. But honestly, the tool itself doesn't matter nearly as much as people think. What matters is what you do with the data that you have. For me lately, I've been using Listing View, and the way I approach it is pretty simple. Whenever I feel stuck or I don't know what to make, I start broad with my niche, which is a bit of an oxymoron. But I'll type in something like dog shirt or wedding invitation or wall art. Nothing too specific. Then I'll filter for listings that are already performing well, whether that's bestsellers, trending items, or listings that are doing unusually well compared to the shop that they belong to. This can easily be seen with Listing Views badges, and I like how they are color-coded so they really stand out. Now, this is where I think a lot of beginners get the wrong idea. They'll find one listing that's doing well, and then they think that they'll just need to tweak it a bit. And I'll be honest, sometimes that works, but a lot of the time it doesn't, especially if you're a smaller shop. Because if your product is basically an imitation of something from a well-established shop, why would someone choose you, right? That shop probably has better pricing, faster shipping, and thousands of reviews backing them up. So instead of focusing on individual listings, what I started doing was looking for patterns. I'm not trying to copy anything, I'm just paying attention to what keeps showing up, like what phrases are repeating, what art styles are trending, or what kind of audiences are these products targeting. Once you start noticing the same things over and over again, that's when you realize there's actual demand behind a certain style or concept. What I like to do at that point is collect a bunch of these listings visually. Like I'll take screenshots and then put them into a workspace, usually something like Kittl, just so I can see everything side by side. And after doing that, patterns become really obvious. And once I feel like I've gathered enough, that's when I start asking how I can make it more specific. Sometimes that means niching it down, and sometimes that means combining ideas. One example of this is something like the silly goose trend. It started as a simple standalone idea, but people kept adapting it into different niches. Now you have versions like Silly Bride, Silly Mom, Silly Teacher. Same core idea, just applied to different audiences. And that's really the game. You're not trying to reinvent the wheel, you're just taking something that works and making it more relevant and specific to the niche that you're in. But there is a limitation to this approach. At some point, when too many people start doing the same thing, you end up with a bunch of listings that all look the same. It starts to feel repetitive, like everything is just a variation of everything else. And when that happens, it becomes harder to stand out. That's usually my signal to stop looking inside of Etsy and start looking outside of it. Which brings me to the second method. The second method is using social media and blogs to find trendsetters. This is where things start to get a little more exciting because instead of just reacting to what's happening inside of Etsy, You're trying to get ahead of what's about to work. And with how accessible social media is now, it's actually not that hard to do. My feed is kind of a mix of everything. I follow people I genuinely enjoy, some meme pages just for fun, but also a handful of accounts that are clearly influencing taste in whatever niche I'm selling on Etsy. So when I'm just casually scrolling, I'll sometimes see a new concept or design that I don't think I've seen on Etsy, and then I take a screenshot, and so I have this bank of design styles in my gallery to try out. The platforms I usually bounce between are TikTok, Pinterest, and Instagram. They each play a slightly different role. Like TikTok feels like more where trends start, Pinterest feels like where they get organized, and Instagram feels like where everything gets polished. What I'll usually do is search something simple like a hashtag related to my niche, like hashtag home decor ideas or hashtag gift ideas. Then I click on a post that looks interesting and then just start exploring from there. I'll check the creator's profile, scroll through their content, and then see who they follow. That's usually how you start finding people who are actually shaping trends instead of just following them. For example, if you're in home decor, you might come across people like Joanna Gaines or Leanne Ford, and then you'll start noticing consistent themes in how these spaces are styled. If you're in the events or wedding niche, you'll see ideas coming from places like The Knot or Brides, where certain color palettes, fonts, and aesthetics start repeating across different events. The important thing to note here is that you're not looking for products to copy. You're looking for direction. You're trying to understand what people are starting to like, what kind of aesthetics are becoming popular, and what kind of messaging resonates with them. Because, hot take, trends don't really start on Etsy. Most of the time, Etsy is where they arrive after they've already gained momentum somewhere else. So if you can catch those signals early, you have a much better chance of being one of the first to bring that idea into your niche on Etsy. The third method, and probably the most underrated one, is going out into the real world. And I know that sounds simple, but it's actually something that made a big difference for me. Things like art fairs, local markets, conventions, and pop-up events are some of the best places to see what people are actually interested in buying right now. When you're online all the time, everything can start to look the same. But when you're out in person, you can start noticing things that don't show up on Etsy yet. You can see different art styles, different materials, different ways of presenting products, and you also get real-time validation by seeing what people are actually stopping to look at and buy. I personally enjoy going to art fairs, and fun fact, I actually used to sell at them years ago. And I think that's why opening an Etsy shop was such an easy sell to me as a new income stream. There's something about talking to other vendors, asking them what's been working for them, and just being in that environment that makes it feel more real. It's a very different experience compared to just sitting in front of a laptop, but at the same time, I'm not going there to copy what I see. I would never, put an artist's work through an AI generator and ask it to copy the design pixel by pixel. To me, that's unethical. It's more about observing styles and techniques rather than taking someone's exact design. And while I can't replicate someone's work directly, I can take inspiration from those textures and apply them in my own way to something like a shirt design. If you're in the events or wedding niche, something like a bridal fair can really be insightful. You'll start noticing what colors are trending, whether people are leaning into minimalist or maximalist, what types of materials are being used, and even how things are priced. All of that information helps you understand not just what looks good, but what people are actually willing to pay for. Now, there's one more piece to the puzzle, and it's the part that actually turns a good idea into a bestseller, which is how you present it. Because you can do all the research, find a solid idea, even be early on a trend. But if your listing photos don't communicate that clearly, people just won't buy. When someone lands on your listing, they're not reading everything right away. Most of the time, they're just scrolling and looking at your photos. So your images need to do most of the work. What I try to think about is, what questions does a buyer have the moment that they see this? Things like, what exactly is this? What makes this different from everything else that I've seen? And what will this actually look like in real life? If your photos don't answer those questions quickly, people just move on to the next listing that answers all of their questions. So instead of just uploading one design onto generic mockups, I try to build out the listing in a way that tells a complete story. The first image is always the most important. That's what gets the click. So it needs to be clear, easy to understand, and ideally show the product in a way that feels real, not overly complicated and not cluttered. Then after that, I start layering in more context. Like I'll show different variations if there are any, different color options, different angles. If it's a shirt, I'll show how it looks when it's worn. If it's wall art, I'll show it in a room where it looks best, even if it's the bathroom. I also like to highlight specific features. If something is customizable, I make that obvious. If there's a unique style or texture, I try to zoom in on that detail. If there's a specific audience it's meant for, I'll call that out visually. Even small things like sizing guides, simple text overlays, or quick instructions can make a big difference. The less someone has to guess, the easier it is for them to buy. And I think this is where a lot of people miss out. They focus so much on finding the right product, but not enough on presentation. Because at the end of the day, Etsy is still a visual platform, and your listing photos are doing most of the selling for you. So even if two people have the same idea, the one with better presentation is almost always the one who's going to win. So when you put all of these together, that's when you start to really add value to the market. You got data from research tools guiding your decisions, you've got social media giving you a sense of where trends are heading, and you've got real-world experiences helping you find ideas that feel fresh and different. You're no longer guessing what to list on Etsy, you're now making more informed decisions based on what you're seeing across different sources. Now, it's not a perfect system, and you're still gonna have products that may not work out, but it removes a lot of the randomness from the process. And over time, that's what really gives you a better shot at landing on something that takes off. Anyway, I hope this was helpful. If you also find inspiration from outside of Etsy, I'm curious to hear where you usually look. And if this helped you out, feel free to give it a like and subscribe if you haven't yet. And I'll see you in the next one.